Welcome to Choices Global, a production of First Assembly of God, Wortmanville, Guyana. In this week's episode, the panelists will be discussing urban planning as we explore how cities are expanding and exploring options for sustainability in this technological age and preserving these cities for future generations. Welcome to our panelists, who are all Guyanese, but some of us currently reside in cities in different parts of the world. The Corbins, Kurt and Chevon, are in Switzerland, yours truly and David Hermanstein in the USA, and Dr. Messiah and Dr. Lee in Guyana. Welcome. Today we're going to commence our discussion examining the appreciative inquiry model and framing the urbanization of our cities within the five stages of this model. These stages are defining the issue or clarifying the area of consideration, discover, finding out what works in our cities, dream, imagining what could be, design, imagining what should be, and destiny, what will be. So, utilizing this model, we will look at cities around the world and commence the process of looking at our own dear country, Guyana. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Our communities and our cities have been plagued by environmental threats, which is climate change, pollution, governance issues, technology, inequality, among others. Panelists, as we commence this discussion on urban planning, how do you, or well, all of us will give our opinion, how do you envision a better city or cities in our nations around the world as we examine how other nations have dealt with these same threats? Dr. Messiah.
Amazing. Amazing. I will go to stage three in the appreciative inquiry model, um, cut through the chase of definition and discovery. We have to dream and dream big and dream loud. We are at that stage. We are a late starter in the modernization of our city. Very late starter. When we compare ourselves with Trinidad, with Jamaica, with Nassau, with Port of Spain, with Kingston, and and with Nassau, just to name a few. We have a unique city, and as a late starter, I think we need to take a good look at the science that we have available. 2022, the science is suggesting to us that in between 3 to 5 years down the road, this colonial city, Dutch, British influence can be seen all over. This city, the development of the city can be challenged by climate change. There is a sheath of ice in Antarctica that scientists have postulated that if it breaks off, it could increase the level in the ocean by 1 meter, 3 feet, 3 point something feet. That could have significant deleterious effects and impact on our own city if we were to build at the same level. So we have to understand that's a challenge, but the dreamers will see the possibilities. And I believe we do have some dreamers. That's my first take.
Statement. Thank you.
So what you're saying, doctor, is that we need to have an urban plan, where we can begin where we can dream about it first, and then we can go to the design phase. I'm going to cut out the first two phases as well. That is designing and discovery, I think they are. And I'm going to jump with your dream and head straight to the design. So what you were saying, doctor, is that we dream big and then we move straight to the design. So we're talking about urban planning in our city. And this, why is even more important is because of the global warming, as you so rightly said. So how can we go about doing that and planning for our city, for our citizens, and making it better? We've been so accustomed to living on the coastland, and it's going to take an effort, a significant effort, for us to move and even diversify and go. So we have to look at things such as land utilization, things such as coding and regulations, and so on and so forth, because we have an opportunity to start afresh. We have an opportunity to build anew. So it should be done as other countries around the world. We can take examples from the developed countries and do it like that, factoring in transportation, factoring in economic areas or industrial areas, factoring in green spaces, factoring in every single thing that we can think of. And of course, it would not happen overnight. So it will take a period of time, but we can begin the dreaming process and we can begin the designing process, which will ultimately lead to the final process, which is resulting or discovery, actually experiencing and living in this city. So I will stop there, Madam Moderator.
In the design phase, I think we can learn something from the past. Long before climate change, the Dutch built the seawalls, and we were able to live here for hundreds of years. So if we consider clearly the design aspect of as we build or before we build, I think we can combat it. God has given us sufficient gray matter that we can combat the effects of climate change. One example is that I think our building code need to be upgraded, and we need to stick to them slavishly. That is, we presently in Georgetown, we are 6 feet below sea level. And I think if we upgrade our building codes, we can overcome the threats that are being, we're told will affect us. In addition, I think if we put in infrastructure first of all, before we decide to do building construction, that might help us also. So we won't run the risk of having roads that are higher than where houses are constructed. So I think if we look at it from a two perspective, one, we upgrade our building codes or building standards, and secondly, we enforce those regulations. So people who are building must adhere to those regulations. And I think it's a good way to start.
Definitely, because if you come into the city from the Atlantic Ocean, like for example, like from the EEZ, which is 200 nautical miles out, you will come in from the heights of the water to the
Yeah.
lower part of the city. It is amazing. I have seen Koreans, Danish, even West Indians. They are startled because when they actually come to the land, when we go to receive them as a boarding party, they say, "What is happening here?" They cannot understand how the water is higher than the land. So anything that breaks from the Antarctica and comes down here and cause the sea levels to rise is going to be devastating to us. So definitely, if we are going to the part of destiny, then somebody need to make it clear that this does not change when a political party changes, because we have to have a firm stand and a commitment that this is for the benefit of the nation, the benefit of the city, and things don't change really nilly. One party out, another party change this and that. So we have to come to that place of consensus where we can work to the preservation and development of our city.
If I could add my perspective to the viewers, I mean, we're talking about urban planning, and at the heart of it, or for the layman, it speaks about where we live, where we work, and where we play. Play meaning recreation. And if I were to go to the destiny stage as well, what I have found in the discourse on urban planning in Guyana is that we've been very singular and of late excitable about planning in Georgetown around an oil economy and not being, I would say, visionary enough to contemplate, as David and others on the panel have indicated, that climate change is real and is beyond us just being an oil economy or a budding oil economy. So we need to ask ourselves, do we even want to focus our urban planning only in Georgetown, or do we want to contemplate what other countries have done and look at what other locations within our country are quite suitable for a new capital? Yes, I'm being bold in my dreaming, but I'm also focusing on the destiny of our country, Guyana. And so when I reflect on countries like Nigeria, who shifted their capital from Lagos to Abuja. I was in Tanzania when, even though they started the shift from Dar es Salaam to Dodoma in the 1970s and even started holding parliament in Dodoma, I was fortunate enough to have visited Tanzania as an international finance expert as recent as 2018 and 2019, when the government finally said, you know what, government workers must move to Dodoma because this is our new capital. And so I just want to throw the idea out there as we're dreaming and contemplating the destiny that we should not be singular or myopic in the view and vision that we have for urban planning in Guyana. We can talk a little bit more about the pillars I spoke about on not only living, but working and playing. And if I may add, I find that even in living in Guyana, our urban planning has been limited to celebrating the regularization of squatter settlements, increasing the number of land titles processed, and facilitating low-income housing. But what about recreation in the areas? And so I'll stop there, but just singling out that we need to go beyond where our discussion is currently on urban planning.
Yes, thank you, panelists. And some interesting points were raised now, and as Siobhan just talked about, is just not only we're talking about low-cost housing and regularizing squatter settlements, but how are we doing an overall development and even looking at the possibility of shifting the city because of the threat of climate change. And then even as an oil economy, we're looking at we will now be able to purchase some of the technologies available. But how will that technology create a wider divide between the mega rich and those who are now coming to be part of the urban setting? So even as we contemplate the urban planning, we must be vigilant. We must be deliberate in how we deliver a cohesive and a transparent and an equal urban planning so that each member of the community benefit. You see, apart from the environmental threat, we see cities need resources, water, food, energy. And once the urban cities begin to expand, this reduces those resources considerably. And so I would like us to contemplate what Siobhan just started, the comment about the dreaming of even shifting. And let us spend a little bit more time on that, because there were countries that shifted their cities into other cities, into other areas, so as to minimize the threats that we are now observing and are now going to feel the effects of. Dr. Lee, your thoughts?
Yeah, the city of Georgetown the southern limit, I think it's Agricola. But I'm aware, I don't have all the details, that the dream has started because there is active consideration of establishing a new city in the Hilly Sand and Clay Belt region that's somewhere in the Timeri area. And that in itself will take us outside beyond, even if the iceberg breaks off, it will provide a measure of security. It will prevent us from being flooded were the city to be established there. So the dream has started. But to go back to what Siobhan was saying, I want to endorse it by saying I think the planning should start, because we should not only dream, and even while we dream, we have, I think, from the oil economy, we should be able to set aside sufficient, adequate resources so that we can contemplate in a real meaningful way the establishment or the removal of the capital city to some place that is secured and will prevent us from suffering the effects of climate change.
Climate change. David, your thoughts?
If that should be, and hopefully they should do it, start this planning now. But I would hope that they would retain at least the maxim of which the first city uh, was called, the Garden City. Chevron seemed to be insisting that there must be some measure of green space um, where persons can plant. I had a little contribution in the oil industry. And whether I go to the meetings at the Ministry of Finance or the Office of the President, I would always insist that we all talking about this oil. But if we should put one letter and change the suffix, we have soil. And soil don't spoil. You know, they have this thing, but oil don't spoil, that came from Trinidad. But we have always have soil. And we are in an agricultural belt. And I would like to see that our city, whether this old one or the new one, have this emphasis where we will have these green spaces so that we can plant and we can grow good food and we can help ourselves and we can sell to various parts of the country or even export maybe.
I don't think that
Especially from
we
a
have
country. Go ahead. Go ahead,
I
Dr.
don't think
Musai.
we have to rediscover the wheel here. There's enough sufficient evidence to suggest that coming out from the political directorate, um, a lot of dreaming, a lot of planning is going on in terms of allowing agriculture to maintain its flagship role in the economy. I don't think I have heard of any shift where agriculture would be sidelined. It is leadership has perceived agriculture as playing a flagship role in the development, in the future development of the nation. And I imagine all we can do is keep hammering that this is something that should be done. And we need, in my view, we need to develop dream about the new city and the new towns that will be built, while at the same time we are strengthening the institutions, the caucus, the sea defense, and all of those kinds of things around old Georgetown, because we will not pick up our bags and all of us march and go some other place. Georgetown will remain Georgetown, but we you have the highlands and the highway and beautiful lands inward. It will take lots of money to be able to do it, and the will to be able to do it. And so that's why urban planning. We just have to ensure that the relay each leg is well designed, and we have the best leader to move and to invest to get us to that destiny.
Yeah. I think critical, Dr. Messiah, as you mentioned earlier, we have some of the systems or infrastructure in place, but we, as a people, we must remember that these things don't usually happen overnight. It takes sometimes decades if we remain focused on the outcome and if we keep the dream in focus, and not shift with every political change or every change in governance, where we stay focused that this is for the benefit and the development of our nation. And looking at the diversifying, I know we have a strong agriculture base, rice and sugar being some of our main crops, and offshoot of that, the development of other smaller crops across the country, our cocoa, from region 1 going to London. So those are some critical things. Even our fishing industry and animal husbandry, those areas are also critical areas, even as we contemplate how the city can be diversified, how the city can be expanded. Kurt, what are your thoughts on our diversifying, looking at the oil economy, however, still maintaining a strong sense and purpose in our agriculture and animal husbandry areas?
Excellent, Madam Moderator. I would just like to piggyback a little bit on Dr. Messiah's earlier comments, his last comments, and give it a title, Urban Revitalization. He was explaining to us about not moving away, as we think about this new dream and this new city and everything that it will encompass, green spaces, proper coding, proper regulations, and enforcement of those regulations, where we'll have the economic area, we'll have the residential area, we'll have an area identified for parks, which is the green space identified for sports. Siobhan mentioned playing earlier, and everything. But we cannot forget the old city or the existing city. And this is where the urban revitalization comes in rather than urban planning. The areas that are highly populated or densely populated and it may not have area for green space, we can still do something about that. We can plan in a manner that is that we can plan in a manner that is that's we can plan in a manner that still allows us to grow and still allow us to develop. That is where there in Geneva here, where there's too much, or where there's a lot of high density of population or populace, there's an area identified for planting, where persons who have the green thumb and who like planting, they can find a space in their apartment compound, in their apartment complex, and they can still plant there. That's where the green spaces come in. So in the city, though it's highly populated or densely populated, there's still a part for green spaces. So in the existing city, we can do that. As it relates to the oil economy and not shifting away from that, I think that is one of the good ways we can do it. Proper revitalization plan and a structure, and we can get there and we can get it. Madam Moderator.
One of the things
Thanks, Sam.
before Cilicia comes in, as the new city or those new areas are being developed, we have to make sure that the city, the old city or the current city, is not neglected. Even as you look right now, people are moving to the suburbs. From the city, people who lived in the city. I grew up in the city of Georgetown. I no longer live in Georgetown because there's a natural move, and I'm not just talking going to Region 11. People are going to the suburbs, and housing communities are developing. What can very well happen there is that the city, the old city as we know it, can become the place for the last, the least, and the lost. We don't want that. We want to have
No.
a fully revitalized city, and the dreamers, the architects of the future, they have to ensure while we are embracing the future, we protecting the current.
You're not neglecting. Good. Your comments, Siobhan?
I think I'd want to build on Dr. Messiah's comment to say that another concept of urban planning is actually looking at urban, suburban, which is what Dr. Messiah just mentioned, and rural, and finding a way to embrace and prepare for all three. And if I stick on the urban component, as Dr. Messiah said, we don't want our city to become for the lost, and it's neglected. I would really posit that our audience contemplates their need and their right to voice the importance of, as Kurt said, revitalizing the city, even as we contemplate other cities or we contemplate expanding. And my own reflections are on a few points. One is that there is a lot of history that sits in Georgetown. And so one, there's an opportunity for economic tourism and economic activities coming out of that. So preserving the city. I was home in December and looking at the state of some of our more popular or more historical buildings shows that there is room for rehabilitation. So that's one benefit I see from the city. The second is around still building out infrastructure for what I said, play or recreation. Recreation speaks to sports, it speaks to activities such as riding and running in the parks and so forth. And I dare say in the spirit of Winter Olympics or any Olympics, sports infrastructure is important for our nation to be well represented, because if you don't have it at the community levels, then we don't have enough persons coming in to a program, learning how to run, learning how to swim, learning how to cycle. There's so many sports at the Olympics that we could participate in if we had the infrastructure. And may I close with the fact that at the community, but also at the national level, we need to be contemplating the cost. I think Bishop Messiah mentioned that. We have to contemplate the cost because we've got a 2022 budget, which is just about 2.7 million US dollars. 2.7 billion US dollars. And in terms of urban planning, we've only ever allocated in infrastructure this year, I see we've allocated about 0.5 billion US dollars, about 95 to 100 billion Guyana dollars. But I dare say that the dreams that we have, we definitely have to contemplate how we could leverage the oil resources that will be coming in to really revitalize, as Kurt says, our capital city, but also to have a vision beyond Georgetown. And so that we are not stuck and building on the density in Georgetown, but actually pushing our dream and our people out to other areas that could generate more economic activities for Guyana.
Closing comments, Dr. Lee.
I reflected on the Timeri area, the hilly sand and clay belt region, for several reasons. I like the idea, and if you go in that part of the country, you'll find pockets of Jamaicans, St. Lucians, and Haitians, because that area has already been demarcated for animal husbandry and different types of crop cultivation. So I am supportive of the city being incrementally removed or relocated in that area, because based on the geographic space and what has already been demarcated there, it will provide for its own sustainability vis-a-vis the green economy. I agree, yes, we should maintain the city as it presently is while we move. But at the same time, I'm saying that we need to go beyond the dream as quickly as possible and start really doing some developmental work in that area.
Closing comments, David.
I think Chevron was referring to the city budget. And when I saw that budget, the city of Georgetown, said to myself that that could only do to drain the city. Um, uh, Dr. Messiah is a specialist on solid waste management, and maybe in a subsequent program, we can get some thoughts on that. But I have always been thinking that with the problems that we have in the city right now, it's not only that green space are not available and lots of migration to the city without any serious planning. But we have had so much imports into the city. And once we have all these containers coming into the city, there will be garbage. And the garbage coming in and not going out is a problem. I have been having a dream of an island or someplace where we can build barges and take this solid waste out and process them into something. This is all in the future, but I look forward to hearing all the thoughts and working with whoever I can for the development and advancement of our city or cities to come.
Okay. Thank you, David. Closing comments, Kurt?
Re-embedding the urban into the rural, or re-embedding the urban in the rural. Dr. Messiah spoke about not forsaking, not having the lost alone remain in the city. We can re-embed the urban into the rural. All of the amenities that we find in the city, we can take it into the rural. And persons will not have to leave the rural and come to the city to get a better education, to get better facilities, to get an access to a swimming pool. Where we living currently in Switzerland, you can go into the mountains and it has lights, it has Wi-Fi, it has every single thing that you can think of. Every village has its own post office. You don't have to leave the city to come down. You don't have to leave the rural to come down to the city for any transaction, governmental or otherwise. Incentives are given to the business persons to operate up there. So we need to embed the urban into the rural. We need to clean up our pollution. These are my dreams. These are things that I know that can happen. I've seen it happen. I'm living where it can happen. And we have a chance. We have a great opportunity to do this with our urban planning, with our new city in an incremental but also rapid basis. We don't have a lot of time. Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you, Kurt. Closing remarks, Dr. Messiah.
Well, I'm fascinated by what I've heard so far, and what can I add? I like Dr. Lee's notion. I think I read something and I heard something about Silica City, which is on that highway. I want to push the plug quickly. That intermediate Savannah on the Linden Dyke Highway, we should build a relationship with Israel. They transformed their desert into producing grapes, cauliflower, broccoli, you name it, they have it. We need their technology. And so we build a relationship with them and introduce them. Let them teach our young people how to transform the desert into a beautiful garden. And leadership is either the problem or the solution.
Thank you so much, panelists. This brings us to the end of today's discussion, and by no means the end of or saturating this discussion. But urban planning is a responsibility of each individual. You live in a city, you're responsible for that city. We've heard stakeholder involvement. We've heard about re-embedding, and I like what Kurt talked about, re-embedding the urban into rural. And so allowing services and amenities to be spread right across, thereby reducing inequality. And I want us to continue to discuss this with your children. Discuss it when you go to your workplace. We have started to dream, and I want to encourage all of us to protect and dream for your city. You can join us for updates and information on our website, faogw.org. And just reminding you, this is Choices Global.